a certificate. She got a certificate in the culinary arts from the San Francisco Cooking School. And she's here today to talk to us about how to prepare food. So I just sort of want to sort of give you a little piece of information. When I talk to my patients about eating, I never use the word or the phrase eat healthy. I actually always talk about eat well. And this is actually why it's such a joy to have Dr. Shiue and Chef Shiue with us, because she's going to help us develop the tools to eat well and so that we can be around and be happy-go-lucky and enjoy ourselves. So please, Dr. Shiue.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Sorry, I need to click on the screen to get all these reminders out of the way. Welcome, everybody. I'm very honored and grateful to be here. I used to work at Palo Alto Medical Foundation, so I spent many years commuting from San Francisco down to the peninsula. And some of you may know me from that time when I first started teaching cooking classes to the community in 2012. So before I get started with my presentation, I kind of want to elaborate a little bit on what brought me to this point of, taking the kind of crazy idea of a self-funded sabbatical, a year off after having practiced internal medicine for 10 years, way back then, to further my ability to teach people the tools that they need to support their health and wellness. I'd been practicing in primary care for a decade, and while I was doing my best using all of my training that I was very fortunate to have to be a good doctor to my patients, I felt like I wasn't always helping them as much as I wanted to. And sometimes I would feel that frustration from patients who weren't getting better, even in terms of feeling better, not necessarily what their lab test showed or what the number on the scale showed or what their blood pressure was, although those are all the markers that we use. They didn't feel well. And that was something which I thought, that's really hard to do with Western medicine. And then I was fortunate to have truly an epiphany that my lifelong love of food, which really started as a lifelong love of eating, followed by cooking and taking my first cooking class when I was 7, could be the tool that I needed. I used to think that it was, we always say it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery, and this isn't. I actually think it's more of an art, the art of helping people get well and feel better. And so I took that plunge to basically start teaching cooking classes, practiced that for a few years, and then really honed my skills to be a better teacher of cooking and to learn how to flavor things well without relying excessively on salt, sugar, and fat. And so that is really kind of filling the blanks of what my journey became. And then after the cooking school, I founded a cooking class program for patients at Kaiser Permanente in San Francisco, and that was in 2016. So that brings us to the current day where I, along the way, last year, almost exactly a year. Sorry, I got muted somehow. And share a couple of recipes from this book. When I was planning this event with Ashish and Erica, I thought, oh, this might not be a good idea for me to teach Indian recipes to Indians. So I'll just fill in sort of my cultural background with that as well. I'm the daughter of immigrants from Taiwan, from East Asia, but I spent a year during college in Singapore, which has a sizable Indian population. And that's where I really started to learn about spices and really started to explore other cultures through food. And then the father of my children is part Indian as well. So I feel like through life experience, I can be grandfathered or grandmothered into having some knowledge of spices. But the two recipes I will share with you are, let's call them fusion or Indian inspired. So before we get to that, I thought I would talk a little bit about spices and my approach to what's called culinary medicine. Next slide, please. So culinary medicine is defined as the art of food and cooking blended with the science of medicine. It's a way of teaching people to achieve their best health through eating meals that prevent and treat disease and also restore well-being. So just like Dr. Molina said, it's not enough to be healthy through numbers or through medications, but to actually feel well. That is the end goal for everybody. And I really like this approach as a way of empowering patients and partnering with my patients to use food that they enjoy eating and that's part of their culture for their own self-care. Next, please. Because people eat food, not nutrients. So while registered dietitians know more than I do and have more training in the specifics of nutrition, that is necessary, but I think often not sufficient. So the next step is taking that information and translating it into food that we can actually cook and enjoy eating. Next slide. There's a picture of Thrive Kitchen, my cooking program at Kaiser. And this is before the pandemic. Right now it's all virtual. So this is now my kitchen. It's open to actually everybody now as a virtual series. It's once a month. And if you're not a Kaiser member, it's just $20 because it's subsidized. And as you can see here, it's very low tech by design. We used to pop up in this conference room and we use induction burners to cook together. And the reasoning behind that is that I don't think it should be complicated for people. It shouldn't be expensive and you shouldn't need any special equipment. So if we can do it in a conference room, you can do it in your home kitchen. And certainly now that we're doing the classes virtually, it will be done in your home kitchen. So I invite you all to take one of those classes or many of those classes if you're interested. Next slide, please. So the goals of my cooking classes and of these presentations that I really enjoy doing are to get people inspired to cook more at home, whether you're a beginner or an experienced cook, to maybe learn some new ideas or some new ways to improve the health promoting aspects of your cooking. And thereby improving your health. I cook recipes from all different cultures as a way of both making your cooking more interesting and giving more variety and also celebrating the great diversity that we have here in the Bay Area. And finally, empowering my colleagues, my physicians and other healthcare providers to inspire themselves and share this message with patients. Next slide, please. So I use very general nutrition principles. In fact, I call it kind of nutrition light. I don't have time in the classes to go over details of nutrition. I think for those details, it is actually better to talk to a registered dietitian. But I use these general principles of how to build a healthy plate, no matter what you're eating. And you can see that in the flyer that I have a picture of there, that it should be plant strong. So no matter how you define your diet, whether that is, vegetarian, vegan, if you're an omnivore, a pescatarian, or some variation in between, that everybody should be eating mostly vegetables. Most of the principles kind of focus around some of the principles of the Mediterranean diet, largely because that's where we have a lot of the scientific evidence. But I like to say that it's the Mediterranean diet principles translated to many different cultures. And so the focus here is having you eat more legumes, dark leafy greens, and whole grains, and using fresh herbs and spices to add flavor and also vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. Next slide, please. So these next few are just some pictures to kind of whet your appetites of some of these ingredients. So we have legumes. Next slide. Leafy greens. And I'll just pause here and invite anyone to name this green.
Lotus.
Not lotus. I heard
It's
Alocasia leaves.
Alvi?
Alocasia
No,
leaves.
taro.
Taro root. Taro root.
Taro
No,
leaves.
Yes,
lotus.
this is the leaf of the taro plant, which I know goes by it actually has
Colocasia.
many, yes, colocasia is the, I guess the species name. It goes by many names, actually. It's one of the plants that has many names, even sometimes multiple names in several cultures. So yes, very good. This is one that usually stumps people, but I figured people in this audience might know. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Whole grains. So here's some brown rice, but there are many whole grains. And that's just an example of how, it's not one size fits all, but it's one type of diet that may be applied to many cultures. Next slide. Another very general but very useful principle, eat the rainbow, right? It looks beautiful. We say we eat with our eyes first. No matter what you're eating, make it look good, garnish it for yourself. Even if you're eating leftovers, or I like to say, even if you're eating leftovers by yourself, you should still plate it nicely, maybe garnish it with some fresh herbs, because you really want to enjoy it. And when we have food that is plated beautifully, we tend to eat more mindfully, more slowly, rather than just mindlessly guzzling it down, which can help with portion control. Next slide. So this is just a picture of the book, same principles as I just described that I teach in my cooking classes. The first section actually features a lot of nutrition information. I have a glossary of spices, of whole grains, legumes, and other produce and their general nutrition and health properties. I give advice on how to stock your pantry if you are either starting a new kitchen or trying to start a new healthy kitchen, and some of the key equipment that I think is useful to make this easier. And a little bit on menu planning as well, because I know that a challenge for a lot of us is that we're busy, we work all too much, and then it can be very hard to know what to cook when you're tired at the end of the day. So I advise everyone to plan out their meals for the work week, on the weekend or whenever it is that you have time, and try to get everything in one grocery list so that you're ready to go. And then the second half of the rest of the cookbook, which is really more of 3/4 of the book, features 175 recipes from around the world. They're divided by geographical location. So the first section is California, where I've lived now for almost 25 years. Asia, primarily East Asia, that's what I have most experience cooking. A few South Asian inspired recipes, a few Southeast Asian recipes. The next section is on the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Mostly because of the Mediterranean diet principles, also because I love that food, and I always like to shout out my claim to fame that I did work at Murad, which is a Michelin-starred Moroccan restaurant in San Francisco, and I learned a lot about spices then. And finally, the last section is on the food of Trinidad, which is where my husband is from, and which has half the population is originally from India. But it's a very different take on Indian cuisine. So I would say even just for that section alone, you may want to get the cookbook. Next slide. So we'll pivot a little bit here on spices and health. And so many of you may have one of these at home, the masala daba. I have the same one pictured there. Convenient way of not just storing your spices and having them handy, but because it's opaque and covered, a good way of keeping your spices flavorful and from not spoiling. So you want to keep them stored away from heat, away from light. I think probably this audience knows that all. So why do we use spices? I think, I have these maybe a little bit out of order depending on your perspective, but first, spices add flavor to food, and different spices can often kind of conjure different cultures, different parts of the world, different cuisines. But you'll find that as you use spices, that there are many spices that are actually used in many far-flung different cuisines around the world. And that can be kind of interesting also in seeing how different combinations of spices can create a very different effect overall. Beyond the flavor though, and the connection to culture and cuisine, all spices are medicine, basically. They were our first medicine before we developed pharmaceuticals. And many of them are actually the source of some of our derived pharmaceuticals. So as a group, spices are anti-inflammatory and have a lot of antioxidants. Today we kind of wanted the theme to be around supporting immunity given the pandemic that we've been in now for a couple of years. And so I wanted to highlight and go over in detail some of the many spices that support immune function. So these are turmeric, ginger, garlic, black pepper, and cumin. And I want you to pay attention well to this next section because there will be a quiz at the end, at the very end, because you all have to stay to be eligible for the quiz. We'll be raffling off 3 copies of my book. So pay attention. All right, next slide. So let's start with turmeric. For each of these spices, I wanted to break down what they taste like, their use, and some of their health benefits. So for turmeric, I would describe its flavor as being earthy and peppery. We use this in many curry powder blends. It's used alone sometimes as well, and it's used in many different cuisines. It is the most potent anti-inflammatory that we know of. And in fact, in one study, its anti-inflammatory effect for pain was found to be, not too much, 3 to 5 teaspoons per day for arthritis pain. 3 teaspoons, for those of you who don't know, is 1 tablespoon. And so it's kind of not impossible to get to that point. Anti-inflammatory effects refer both to what we think of as, ouch, that hurts, I'm achy, I'm inflamed, but also the effect on chronic disease. So some of those things that we can prevent with having anti-inflammatory ingredients in our diets include autoimmune disease, cholesterol, and blood sugar, and related to that, diabetes and heart disease. And I do see some questions popping up in the chat, which I think we'll answer at the end. So keep throwing those into the chat though. All right, next slide. Oh. Black pepper. So this is not one of the ones that I highlighted, but as an important corollary to turmeric, it increases your body's ability to use the anti-inflammatory properties of turmeric by increasing the bioavailability of the main biologic component, which is curcumin. So we all know black pepper. Probably every cuisine uses it. Sharp, kind of a nice bite that can be used in a lot of different foods. And it also has anti-inflammatory properties. But in the case of the spices that we're talking about today, important to pair it with turmeric. Next slide. So ginger, here's a picture of fresh ginger root. The flavor is sharp, it's bright. It's used a lot in all kinds of Asian cuisines, in desserts, in tea, at many, many different recipes. From a medical point of view or a health point of view, it can be used for a lot of gastrointestinal complaints, including nausea. That can be the nausea of morning sickness in pregnancy, or the nausea also of being, motion sick. And so it's powerful and it tastes good. It's anti-inflammatory as well. And one interesting study looked at its use in treating migraine headaches, where this tiny amount, 1/8 of a teaspoon, which is really just a couple of pinches of dried ginger, was equivalent to the drug sumatriptan, which is known by the brand name of Imitrex for migraines. So something, it may not work for everyone, but that was shown in one small study. And unfortunately, a lot of the studies around spices are quite small, but hopefully we'll have more research in the future. But that just goes to show you that for very common conditions, something that is probably in most of our pantries, many of these things can be useful. Okay, next slide, please. Garlic, so savory, aromatic, I would say the flavor base for most of the food that I make, and it's used in most cuisines around the world. Garlic is one of the spices, and a spice is basically the dried form of any part of a plant. Except for the leaves, which then get called herbs. Any other part of the plant that gets dried is called a spice. So garlic as a spice, people have known for a long time, is very helpful in preventing and treating heart disease. So it can lower blood pressure, it can lower LDL cholesterol, and it has also been studied for antimicrobial properties. Next slide, please. And then cumin is, this ultimate earthy flavor, which is used around the world, Mexican, Indian, Middle Eastern cuisines. Some parts of Western China also use cumin a lot. Has a great flavor. It also helps with digestion, and it's a source of iron, and from that can help prevent anemia. Next slide. So those are the spices I wanted to highlight, and I'll be using, I think, all of those, or at least most of them in the recipes I'm demonstrating today. And then I just want to show you a few pictures of recipes from the book that use some of these spices. So from the California section, I have a very simple but delicious recipe for a ginger orange oatmeal using ginger. Next slide. This is an example of one of my favorite recipes from the Asia section, what I call the celebration red salad. And the featured spice in this is black pepper. Next slide. From the Mediterranean and Middle East section, here's a recipe for shakshuka, which is a savory tomato-based breakfast dish of tomatoes, red bell pepper, and a lot of spices, including cumin and garlic. Next slide. And then from Trinidad, this is a recipe for a curry side dish, curry mango, which uses turmeric, as you can see from that very bright color there. And tonight I'm actually making a different savory mango dish than this one here, but that's another one that is an interesting one from the cookbook. All right, next slide, please. So these are the recipes which I know you received today for two very simple things. They are simple to make. You do need to, for the first one especially, have to have a fairly well-equipped spice pantry, but easy to make. And I think a good way of illustrating how to use spices in different ways. So I'll be demonstrating the first, the magical mango tamarind rasam, and then the spice green smoothie, which is, well, you'll see when I demonstrate it, my take on, really my take on a mango lassi, because it has mango in it as well, with a few extra things added. Next slide. This is just how you can get in touch with me and follow and connect with me on social media. So on Twitter, Instagram, it's Spicebox Travels, which is also the name of my blog. And then on Facebook and YouTube, although I'm not very active on YouTube, it's the Doctor's Spicebox. So you'll get all of this later, but please do follow me. I share a lot of information on all of these channels. And so I think, maybe I can answer a few questions before we get to the cooking demo, and then we'll have a chance to answer more questions during the demo.
All right, Linda. So you just let me know how many questions you want, because there are so many. First of all, do we lose food value when we store food for a week in the refrigerator because we don't have time to cook every day? Says Yogesh.
That is a great question. So I would say yes is a general answer. We lose vitamins as soon as we actually even harvest produce. And so, one thing to keep, there are two principles from that. One is try to get as fresh a vegetable as you can. Farmers markets are great for that, and buy an amount that you can consume quickly. However, next best after that is actually frozen produce. So you may not want to use that for everything, but for things like soups and stews, things like frozen spinach, for example, frozen peas, all of those are flash frozen at harvest. So they're actually often more nutrient dense than what you might have had sitting in your refrigerator for a couple of weeks. When it comes to cooked food, even the cooking process and using heat can destroy some heat sensitive vitamins, in particular vitamin C. So there's that, but the things that you don't lose are, you don't lose the fiber, which is a very important of our diets, a part of our diets that many people do not get enough of. That is going to stay there no matter how long you keep it in your refrigerator. And, good refrigeration is also a key to kind of sealing in some of the remaining nutrition. So eat it as fresh as you can, but you're definitely not losing everything by eating leftovers.
Okay, great. Monica wants to know, I usually put a teaspoon or so of turmeric in each recipe. How do we get the 3 teaspoons per day? Is the pill form recommended?
And I love that question too, because I think, yes, even if you're eating, more turmeric than the average American, for example, it can be hard to get to that amount. So a pill form can be a way of getting a more concentrated amount. An issue with supplements is that they are not FDA regulated, and so you may not always know exactly what you're getting. But if there is I think it's called the QSP seal. There's a quality seal that you can look for. Not all supplement companies are big enough to, I think, pay for that certification process. But if you can find that, that would be a good one to look for. And yes, that can be a way to get to a higher amount of certain ingredients, including turmeric.
Okay, great. A lot more questions about turmeric. Do you happen to know a type of turmeric with high curcumin content?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question. If that's referring to like dried turmeric, ground turmeric, or to the root, I don't know that there's a variety actually. So I'll just say I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, me know if you want to specify. How about ginger? Yogesh wants to know if you have an example of using ginger for preparing desserts. You were talking about oatmeal, which was interesting.
Yeah. So I think of ginger as both a sweet and savory ingredient. And for desserts, any place that you might use cinnamon or nutmeg or cloves or cardamom, all of those, ginger I would include in that. So I would say that for the oatmeal that I showed the picture of, and for the smoothie that I'm demonstrating today, those are both kind of dessert-like things. That's one way to do it. So you have a little bit of sweetness, and you have just a little bit of ginger to bring on, kind of offset the sweetness and make it a little bit more interesting. So there's no wrong way to use a spice. Kind of use it the way and see how it tastes to you, and you can add more or less depending on that.
Okay, that's great. And I think we'll let you get started if you like.
Okay. I think that's good. And then we may have more time after that. Okay. Yeah. So for the first one, just get this out of the way. We're going to be making the rasam, which is I like to think of as a savory kind of digestive broth, very comforting, often, and I'm sure all of you know, made with a tomato base. I had a really delicious one many years ago from the celebrity Indian chef, Suvir Saran, and he made his with pineapple. And I loved it. It was this great blend of spices and pineapple and onion and all this other stuff. And I thought, oh, why not mango then? So that's how this kind of came about. And so the key elements of this are pretty simple. I'm just warming the water first because we want to dissolve our tamarind pulp. And I'll show you what I buy usually is this kind of block form of tamarind, which has seeds in it. So I just have a small amount of that, and I'm going to dissolve it in some warm water before adding the other ingredients. And we'll just have to remember to take out the pits before we serve it. So this water is already warm, so I'm just going to stir as I talk about the rest of this recipe. Once that's all dissolved, I'll be adding mango pulp to it. So you can make your own mango pulp. I would say this might be a good use of your overripe mangoes that are about to go bad, when you can basically just, remove the seed and skin and then put it in a food processor or blender, and then strain it of excess fiber if you want. But I actually have purchased some canned mango pulp for this because you want it to be very smooth. But again, you can definitely make your own. The disadvantage of this is that it has a lot of sugar in it. And so for people who are watching their sugar, it would be better to make your own mango pulp. But just make sure
Dr. Shiue,
yes.
One thing that kind of popped up in the chat was, is it possible to change the camera angle a little bit so that
you can? Oh, yes. Thank you.
Just a little bit, but we don't want to cut you off, okay?
There we go. You're just missing the top of my head, but I think that's okay. You can still, as long as you can see my lips move, you can hear what I'm see what I'm saying. So hopefully you get a better view. Is that good enough? Right now, this is, you probably can't see this because it's so tiny. I'm just dissolving the tamarind pulp in here.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, very good. It's getting a little hot, so I'm gonna switch to something with a longer handle. So there's tamarind, and then so that lends that nice tartness, and which kind of plays off of the sweetness of the mango pulp. And then we're going to make our own rasam powder, which you can also buy, but to show you how easily, and many of you might do this already, you can make your own spice blends, which I think is another good way to customize. But you know, if you don't want to spend the time making your own spice blends, you can certainly purchase them. So of course you can do it the old-fashioned way with a mortar and pestle. It's a good upper body workout, or you can do it the way that I typically like to do it, especially when I want to make a fine powder, which is with a electric spice or coffee grinder. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I'm just making sure that you can see what I'm doing, and I'm just going to occasionally push down on my tamarind to make sure it gets fully dissolved here. Okay, so the spices that are going into this are some dried whole chilies, some whole coriander seed, some cumin seed, and black pepper. And so they're all in the bowl of my electric spice grinder. And I'm just going to grind that up right now. Almost there. There's just one very stubborn piece of the chili pepper that doesn't want to be ground. So let me just keep at this for a second. Okay, so you can see I have a fine powder now, and it is so fragrant it might make me sneeze from the chilies and the black peppercorn here. But that's really the advantage of having freshly ground spices. It's going to be much more potent than anything that you pre-buy. The other step, which I didn't demonstrate, is dry toasting your spices before you grind them to start releasing some of those essential oils, which add some of the flavor and aroma to it. Okay, so we're going to set that aside for a second. And my tamarind pulp is almost all the way dissolved. I'm going to continue pushing down on that as my water comes to a simmer, and then we're going to add the mango pulp to that next. So again, for this audience, I know you may all use spices even more than I do. So a lot of these are principles which you already know, but I think for a lot of people who don't cook with spices, you know, a little bit of education goes a long way in terms of how to get the most flavor out of your spices, which can be through the dry toasting or in, you know, cooking in a little bit of oil, which we'll also be doing in making the tadka for this in a second. So two different ways of bringing out the flavor of spices. Ashish had asked me to do an oil-free recipe. These both are, except for the tadka, which is the spiced oil. And so, you know, if you didn't want to use oil, if you're doing oil-free cooking, I would say that you can just toast the spices for it instead. You'll be missing a few things, but it would be one way of adding another layer of flavor. So that will be a different set of spices, which I'll show you in a moment. And I think my tamarind is dissolved enough here. I'll take out the pits later, but I'm going to add the mango pulp. and let that simmer for a while because I want those flavors to combine.
Is the mango pulp store-bought, or is this something that you?
Yeah, so this one, that is this canned mango pulp, but you can certainly make your own and just make sure to strain it. Otherwise, it will be quite fibrous. And so for straining, I would use a fine mesh strainer like this, just to remove all of that because you want it to be drinkable and smooth. So it's a beautiful color. And right now I have this really lovely scent of mango. And I'm going to add just a little bit of salt to this. In the recipe, this calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. In all of my recipes, I use Diamond Crystal's kosher salt, which actually has a little bit less sodium than regular table salt. And the reason for that is the way that it's manufactured. It's a kind of a lighter, fluffier crystal, flakier. And so it packs less densely into measuring spoons, and that it's still sodium chloride, but that's why it has less sodium per measurement. So we'll just let that simmer for a while. And yeah, let me bring that to a boil. Just checking to make sure I'm adding everything that we need here. And I'm looking at the recipe that I gave you, and I am wondering if I have told you where to add your rasam powder. And I think that's missing from this, so I apologize. Oh, no, it's here. I just didn't see it in my instructions. So we're going to add that now as it's simmering. And literally just putting it into this broth and stirring, and we'll let that simmer for a while. So the flavors we'll get here will be a little spicy, a little sweet, a little sour, and all the different flavors just from the other spices in there. So it's actually fairly complex. It's not just what it might sound like, which would be kind of a fruity flavor. It's just very spiced and balanced, and I think a nice appetizer. And so after that's finished, we'll be adding our tempering oil, or tadka, which is the spices that we're going to bloom in some oil. I'm going to move this to the back burner so that we can do that in view. Let me get this out of the way and make sure I continue to simmer that. Okay. So we're going to use a very small amount of oil here, basically just about 2 teaspoons. We'll warm that up. And I'm going to bring out a few other ingredients, spices here. Okay, this is one of my favorite ingredients, curry leaves, which I'm sure you all know, but I didn't actually really use a lot until maybe 10 or 15 years ago, when I saw my first curry leaf bush in person. It was amazing, and the scent was incredible. And so I like to, it's great if you can grow your own. I know some people do, but I like to keep them in the refrigerator or even freeze them. Not quite as potent, but nice to have around. So that will be going into this. But first, we're going to toast some black mustard seed. And as all of you know who cook with black mustard, these may pop. So I'm going to be careful as I'm doing this here. You don't want to see me get injured live on camera. So the black mustard seeds, we're going to get there until they're toasty and just start to pop. And then after that happens, oh, here we are. I have some cut up green chili, which I'll add to that. So without toasting the mustard seeds in particular, you really don't get that nice toasted flavor. It's a completely different flavor profile. So this is a really key element here. One other note is that by adding some fat, it helps absorb certain nutrients, especially vitamins A, D, E, and K. You don't necessarily need to add oil to do that, but you do need some fat in whatever you're eating to be able to absorb those ideally. So this is the idea that, we're not just eating food. If we think about how we're balancing it in various ways, we can also enhance the nutrition that we get from it.
Linda, is this a good time to ask you about the oil?
Yeah.
Ajit is asking just his curiosity about your choice of canola versus like avocado or grapeseed and how the flavor might change or how the spices come more alive in the tempering using canola.
So I would use any neutral oil. So all of these would be similar. So canola, grapeseed, and avocado oil would all be fine. We're not doing this at a very high temperature, so it doesn't necessarily need to be something that can be cooked at high heat. If you want to change the flavor, you could use other fats, coconut oil, ghee. You could even use olive oil if you want to do more of a fusion-y thing, but know that all of those will add a different flavor to it. But yeah, all of these things are kind of to your taste. The key is really just to have an oil, and I prefer a more neutral flavor for this. Okay, so these are starting to pop. So I'm going to add my chilies for a second. And we're not really cooking these all the way, it's just slightly. And so the chilies go in next. And then I'm going to add curry leaves to this. And I'm going to try to heat down quite a little. I don't want this to, now it's really popping. You'll see some action over here. So adding a bunch of curry leaves just to bring out their flavor a little bit.
It must smell really good over there.
It smells really good over here, yeah. And what I like about this, it's like the simplest recipe, and yet there is so much flavor going on. Like it would be a challenge for most people to be able to identify, what are all the flavors in this. And I know that you're all familiar with this. Oops, sorry. It's always hard on.
It's like asafoetida.
Yep, that's what we have here. So a little bit goes a long way, right? So it's the key to adding just a little bit more of, savoriness. It's hard to describe this flavor to people who are not familiar with it, but without it, you don't get the full flavor that we're really looking for. I think of it as an enhancer, almost like, a spice MSG, right? So it kind of goes along with all the other spices. And so I'm going to stir that all in together.
Dr. Shiue, two things. One is that the curry leaves that you've chosen are like humongous. Did you get them from?
They are, I was just thinking that they're a little big and it would be better to probably cut them up a little bit. So thank you for that comment. So yes, if I were to repeat this, I would say cut them up, unless you're going to, some people don't, you can eat these curry leaves, but it's really more for the flavor and to infuse the oil with them. That said, I think I don't have quite enough oil because my leaves are so big and so fresh here. So I'm just going to add a little bit more just so that we can carry in more of that flavor.
Right, and the second question that I had was about the hing. When you went over your spices at the beginning, that was not one of the ones that you mentioned. But if you could just kind of talk a little bit more about its medicinal use as well as, health use.
You talk about, did you say hing?
Yeah, he said, asafoetida or hing,
Yes.
for those who don't know, the same thing.
Yes, you're right. I did not mention that as an immune support, but it does actually have antimicrobial properties as well. It's full of antioxidants. So, kind of the key to knowing, does this have a lot of antioxidants, is anything that has a very strong flavor, whether it's pungent or spicy or sharp, that tends to correlate with having a lot of antioxidants, which are just generically chemicals which help fight inflammation and help fight all the damage to cells that things that are pro-inflammatory in our diets can have. So hing is one of those things that has lots of antioxidants. It also helps with digestion and blood pressure. So it does fit into this family well, actually, of all the other spices that I highlighted today. Okay, so now at this point, oh, and there's one more spice I wanted to add, just a little bit of cayenne to this, although I'm not going to add too much because I think I have a pretty big chili that I put in here. So let me put some of it into a bowl and show you what it's going to look like. And obviously you'll want to taste this and make sure that it's to your taste.
We do. Can you pass it over here to us?
Yes, I'm going to be passing around samples through the screen. But you know, many of you may have some of these ingredients, so you could try it right after if you're not cooking along. And again, it's just a take on tradition and made with a little twist. I actually the reason why this is called Magical is I named it after a novel that I really like called The Mistress of Spices. It's from probably the 90s or early 2000s. And I think written by an Indian author who lives in Oakland, somewhere in the Bay Area. And it's a story of basically, a spice shop and the people who come in, cayenne pepper, who come in and out of the spice shop, and kind of all this magic that happens. I knew this would happen. Fresh chilies will do this. So I'm just going to pour a tiny bit of this oil to garnish. And add in some of the whole spices, the toasted mustard seed, my curry leaf, some chili. And so there you go, just like that. Oh, great.
Incredible.
I see the book. I hope some of you have read it. It's really, I should reread it. It's actually it is a very magical story. So there is my rasam, very easy to make. And again, I really highly recommend making your own spice blend because you can customize it too. You may like some things more than others. But again, it's fruity, savory, spicy, a great depth of flavor from all the different spices in it, which again have all these different health properties. And I'll summarize all of those after I demonstrate the second recipe as well. So the second recipe is super, super fast.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it okay to have mango for diabetic people?
Okay, good. So it's a good question. I would say that yes, mango does have a lot of sugar, but it also has a lot of fiber. So in general, I would say that there is no produce that is bad for anyone's diet, but you will want to make sure that you have, you are eating the pulp, you have the fiber in it, because by having fiber with a source of sugar, it slows down the spike in your blood sugar. And so, it is one of the higher sugar things than others. And certainly if you have difficult blood sugar control, you'd want to go over the amounts with your dietitian. But in general, as long as you're having it with something else, protein, fiber, fat, that will slow down the spike in your blood sugar, and so you can certainly enjoy it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so this one I'm just bringing out my big blender. You don't need to have a Vitamix. Any blender will work for this. But a Vitamix or other high-speed blender is a nice thing to have for a lot of healthy cooking, because you can basically incorporate all of that fiber into your food, and it will blend nice and smoothly. So for this, the ingredients, so this is my take on a kind of nutrition enhanced mango lassi. So which, is often has a lot of sugar added to it. yogurt, milk. For this, I'm using actually kefir, which is a cultured dairy product and can be non-dairy. Actually, there are some non-dairy versions of it. Similar to yogurt, it has active bacterial cultures, which are good for your gut bacteria, your microbiome. But most kefir has actually up to, upwards of 10, sometimes even more than that, strains of bacteria that are good probiotics, whereas yogurt typically only has a handful. And so we're putting a cup of that into our blender. And then I always keep some frozen fruits. This is some frozen cubed mango in the freezer. So no sugar added. If you want it to be a little sweeter, you can add some banana too, which also is a source of fiber as well as heart healthy potassium. And then this is the part where it will no longer look like a mango lassi because I'm adding greens to it. So for this one, I decided to kind of balance some of the sweetness of the ingredients I put in with arugula, which is a leafy green, which is quite peppery. So this is going to be a different kind of flavor. And we're making a green smoothie. So this is something I often will have for breakfast as a way of trying to get greens into my diet 3 times a day, which can be challenging for some people. And one of my very easy tips is to keep those triple washed baby greens, whether it's arugula, baby kale, baby spinach, in your refrigerator so that you can eat it raw, you can eat it cooked, you throw it into anything and it will wilt immediately. And I always say there's no excuse not to have your greens because you don't have to even wash it or cut it. It's ready to go. So any of those greens will work well in the smoothie, but I like the flavor of arugula. And then I'm adding, of course, a couple of spices. We have some cardamom, and also some ginger. So this is for
Oops, we have a little bit of a frozen screen, right?
asked about user in a sweet way.
There it is.
Oh, sorry.
We just lost you for a second. We got you back. We got you back.
Okay, great. All right, so you'll hear a little bit of noise for a second, but we're just blending this together. Okay, sorry for the noise, but just like that. So the beauty of this high-speed blender is that you can really completely blend in your greens without having a lot of things floating around. So that's
good.
Where
and people wanted to know, was it ginger powder or fresh ginger, and was it crushed cardamom?
So I use ground forms of both, but you could actually use fresh, or you could even, use ginger juice if you wanted to. Any of those would be fine. But I think for me, this smoothie is something that I will make quickly before I go to work. So powdered forms are the quickest way, but it doesn't really make a difference, whatever you have or what you like. And so
perfect amount.
Yeah, it makes a good one. So you could have this as, enough for 1 or even 2 smaller servings. Yeah, so now that I have my 2 dishes ready, I'll put them here and I can answer some more questions and we can talk a little bit more about them. I would like to take a moment to just go over the ingredients and summarize the nutrition highlights of them. So for our magical mango tamarind rasam, the tamarind has not just that wonderful tart flavor, which I really like in any food, but it has fiber, B vitamins, and iron. And in terms of health properties, it's antibacterial and has beneficial effects on cholesterol and blood sugar. That's kind of the theme of everything here today. The mango has fiber, as I mentioned. It's a very good source of vitamin C, which is also important for immunity, potassium, and antioxidants, and has beneficial effects on the immune system, cholesterol, and as well, it's also heart healthy because of the potassium. So all in theme of our sponsor, the South Asian Heart Center, all of this is heart healthy. The chilies also have benefits for cardiovascular disease and blood sugar. The cumin, as I mentioned, helps with digestion and as a source of iron. I forgot my garnish. My garnish of cilantro here. There, now it looks prettier. So I was talking about making things look good and I forgot to add my garnish. The cilantro has benefits in blood sugar and cholesterol control. The black pepper is anti-inflammatory. Mustard seeds are also anti-inflammatory, have a lot of antioxidants, and they're a source of selenium, which also supports immune function. We talked about, I don't know if I talked about the curry leaves yet. Curry leaves also antioxidants, antibacterial, and help with cholesterol and blood sugar. So it is almost a theme of every single spice in this that it's heart healthy and helps with the immune system, and beneficial in diabetes as well. So, but more than that, you know, when you're eating it, it just tastes good and you can enjoy it as a nice start to your meal. And then the smoothie, I talked about the arugula having a nice peppery taste. In addition, like all leafy greens, it's a good source of fiber and a source of magnesium and potassium. And let's see, we talked about mango already, which this has. Banana has fiber, potassium, also vitamin C. I talked about the probiotics in kefir, and then cardamom has benefits in blood pressure as well. And the ginger, as I mentioned before, helps with a lot of digestive symptoms and is helpful for your immune system. So simple ingredients, very delicious flavor, but lots of benefits for your health. All right, so I think we have time for some of the other questions. So feel free to dig through them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few comments and questions, and I know we're going to do a little raffle for a few books. I'll give you a few. Let's see. Well, a lot of people think it looks very appetizing and would like to taste some. Any opinion on mustard oil for cooking, as it's used extensively in North India and West Bengal?
Yeah, so I know that there was some controversy about mustard oil being imported. I think this is true. I'm not sure if it's still true, and maybe somebody else can share this into this country, but it had to do with the grade of mustard oil. Can anyone comment on that? This is actually information I have from a while ago.
Don't know.
No?
Yes, I can confirm it's been used extensively in North India, for like hundreds of years, and there was some controversy in India where, because of some study funded by Monsanto, it was shown that mustard oil potentially has bad health benefits. The government of India actually banned it and reversed the ban. But courtesy that study in US, in Indian stores, we get mustard oil. We actually use it for cooking, but it says for massage only. That's because US doesn't allow it for cooking purposes. But having said that, even though this is on the channel, we do use it for cooking. Like when the mom comes, she uses it.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be, rich in polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, right? So anyway, that was just a question. So
Okay, yeah, so yes, I couldn't remember the reason why it's always labeled for massage oil. It is definitely a very flavorful oil. I don't know greatly about the health benefits, but as I'm, anything that's pungent like that will have a lot of antioxidants. There is actually a local US producer, I think California-based producer of mustard oil now, or maybe it's Canada. It's somewhere in North America that was introduced to me a few years ago. And it's very high quality and it's very delicious if anybody wants to try that. But, I think a lot of the things which I think if you started by saying that study was funded by Monsanto, that might answer,
Yes.
the bias in the study.
Yes.
Also, may I ask you a question about fenugreek and Kerala? Do you have an idea of how, if it could be used for pre-diabetes?
Bitter melon
Yeah.
Thank you.
and fenugreek.
So fenugreek, what I know most about it is its benefit for lactation for new mothers and producing more breast milk. And that is, incredibly effective. And
Please mute yourself. I'll try to mute somebody. Go ahead.
okay. I believe it's also beneficial in blood sugar control, but more of what I have seen, convincing use of is for lactation. And then
Oops.
We lost you, Dr. Shiue. So just hold on for a second as we fix that.
there, I've just unmuted.
Sorry, that was my bad. I
That's
muted
okay.
you because I was trying to mute other people.
That's okay. The muting happens randomly sometimes too. It's okay.
It does.
You would think that after 2 years of using Zoom, there would be no problems, but there seem to be new problems.
Yeah.
So yes, bitter melon, very effective for blood sugar control. That's been borne out in many studies.
Okay. There were some questions that were a little on the Ayurveda side, and you might, I know that Linda, Dr. Shiue is an Ayurvedic doctor, but somebody was asking to sort of distinguish between what culinary medicine and Ayurveda, and then somebody was asking kind of similarly, like, well, in India, tamarind isn't used in cooking if you have a history of arthritis. So what are in your family? So what are your thoughts? I kind of paired these together.
Yeah, so I really can't answer any Ayurveda related questions. So I'm sorry, I have to decline those.
That's fine.
Culinary medicine versus Ayurveda, culinary medicine is kind of a newer term and applies actually to how Western medicine can use food as medicine, which is sort of along the spectrum, but still separate from the way that ancient healing traditions have used food as medicine. So not just Ayurveda, but also in traditional Chinese medicine, food and herbs have been used for medicinal purposes for a long time. Those are different healing philosophies entirely and can't necessarily be interchanged. So there might be some overlap, but there might also be differences with those. And so, I would say when we talk about culinary medicine in this country, because it comes out of Western medicine, it applies to something separate from those other systems.
Great. Jayesh was talking about adding avocado to the smoothie.
Yeah, you could definitely throw that in as well.
Yeah. I think you've gone through a lot of these, or there's some people answering. We could go if there are more questions, or we could go to a raffle of the book.
Yeah.
What do you think? Anybody want to win a book?
Dr. Shiue, could you bring that book from the back up into the front?
That would be great.
I have many copies. Yes. Let me just show you. So to entice you to try your best to answer the raffle questions, I'm going to show you more of the book. So I showed you some of my favorite pictures already. That's one picture you saw on the slide. Another version of the picture you saw. That's probably my favorite picture from the book. How about this? Does anyone know what this is?
So beautiful, chat it out. Everybody's saying yes, raffle, raffle, raffle. Does anybody know what this is? It might be a raffle question. Red cabbage was the answer.
No, it may be hard to see. So this is dried hibiscus, the kind that's used to make beverages and used in South Asian cuisine.
Can you tell us a little bit about the hibiscus, how it's used?
So this is a particular variety of hibiscus, not the one that you grow for decorative purposes. It's used in Mexican cuisine and called Jamaica to make, a type of agua fresca, or basically a sweetened tea from it. In the Caribbean, it's harvested in the fresh form and also similarly made into a tea that's combined with spices. It's a very delicious flavor. Tastes very similar to cranberry juice. And it has a lot of antioxidants, and it's thought to help with blood pressure as well. But it's kind of a nice example of how, ingredients that grow in the wild can often be harvested. I see there's something about dried red hibiscus. And I couldn't see the rest of that. Could you read that comment, Erica?
About, let's see, how about dried red hibiscus is used to make tea, and it's very good for blood pressure, blood sugar control, and very good with lemon, says Ramisa.
Yeah, okay, great.
So many great comments.
Yes, and someone said it's also used as a diuretic. Yes, also.
Yes.
So the one caveat with that is because it's so tart that people often add a ton of sugar, and that might offset any of these health benefits that you're having. So just be careful with that. Yeah, so this is from my Middle Eastern section. This is a Turkish-inspired carrot yogurt dip with spices, and served as an appetizer with endive leaves.
That looks incredible. And yeah, Duval, we can't vouch for the Starbucks hibiscus drink, whether they add sugar.
Yes, let's see. I'll show you a little bit more. So many of the recipes don't have pictures, and it can be kind of fun to actually dig through and find things that are not already highlighted with a picture. This is kimchi fried rice. So in each section, I also talk about different pickling or fermented foods that are used in different cultures. There's also a whole section on pantry, making your own condiments, sauces, and flavorings, spice blends. This is a recipe from my culture, from Taiwan, which is for squid with garlic chives. Very quick to make, very delicious.
Yeah, was there vegetarian kimchi, Prakriti, you wanted to know?
There is vegetarian kimchi. Yes, you do. You just need to look at, there's also a recipe to make your own kimchi here. You need to look at ingredient labels always. If you cannot find one made without basically brined shrimp or brined fish or fish sauce in it, you can substitute kelp powder, because you do want to have that kind of briny taste. But there is a recipe to make your own. So if you make your own anything, you can control your ingredients. And then this is kind of a fun recipe for those of you who have been to Hawaii. Spam musubi is very popular. Spam is definitely not a health food. So I made a version of this is called teriyaki tofu musubi, and I make it with brown rice. And so it's a much better for you version of a popular snack food. This is another kimchi dish, kimchi jjigae, which is a tofu and kimchi stew. Very flavorful, from Korea. Let's see, what else can I highlight here for you?
That looks everything looks delicious.
Yeah, one more recipe. You saw this picture earlier. This is for Jamaican rice and peas, which is basically red kidney beans and coconut rice with a lot of spices. But this version is hands off. You just put it all into a rice cooker. So, different ideas. All the recipes in here, I like to say, are quite complex in flavor, but simple for any home cook to make. And most of them are weeknight recipes. So now that I've gotten your appetites wetted for this, I have a few questions for the raffle. So the way that this is going to work is I will ask the questions one by one, and you can all quickly get ready by your keyboards. First person to answer the questions correctly in the chat will win one of the 3 copies.
Oh, the pressure. Get on your marks.
Everyone has to be ready here, okay? Get ready.
I'll start calling them out as you say. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first question, and these all refer to spices that I talked about in my presentation. So we'll see who paid attention. The first one, this spice is helpful for nausea.
Huh? I got ginger.
Ginger.
Oh my gosh, I have so many gingers.
I know.
I think it's Karen Riley.
Fast fingers here, but we have to go with the first. That's the rule.
Karen, it's Karen.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, celebration. You won a book, an incredible book.
All right. All right, everyone, flex your fingers. Get ready for the
Karen,
next.
you're not in this round.
Yes. Important.
Once you win, you're out.
Yeah. Okay, number 2. This spice is popular in Indian and Mexican cuisines and is a source of iron.
Cumin.
Cumin seed.
Did we get it?
I got it.
It was Rena. Is that Rena
Deepa.
saying I got it?
Deepa.
Did we get the answer? Linda?
That is the correct answer. Yes. So was it
Cumin,
Rena?
it would be Rena.
Yes.
Was she saying yes, I got it?
Yeah. This
She's
is
our
sort
second
of like,
winner.
you know, where I really want to go and I haven't been able to get a reservation is French Laundry. And apparently getting a reservation is the same process. People are poised next to their keyboards when the reservation's open.
I've heard that. Unless you're Linda Shiue, you can get an in.
I don't know how you do this. Okay,
Just tell them.
everyone take a deep breath and relax. Even if you can't win this copy, I encourage you to buy a copy. That would make me very happy. But you can also get it from your local library. It is available also as an ebook or not. I've never even seen. But I think you should actually get the actual book if you're going to get it. And if you get it from an independent bookseller, even better. Support your favorite independent bookseller. In San Francisco, Omnivore Books, which is a wonderful culinary bookstore, has signed copies available. So, all right, finally, for those of you who want to test your luck one more time, the final question. Adding this spice to turmeric increases its bioavailability.
Black pepper.
We got black pepper.
Black pepper.
Garlic.
All right.
Was it black pepper?
Black pepper.
Garlic. Black pepper.
Our first was somu.
Me.
What, right?
I said it black pepper, H parrot.
Black
Oh,
pepper.
it was a typing. I'm so
That's
sorry,
okay.
but it was a typing. We can't take it, Wandana, but we're gonna honor you by saying you said it first. But I think the winner will go to somu, huh?
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Erica be in charge of this. I don't want to be involved.
I have to. It's a little bit, but we have to follow the instructions. But officially, you did say it.
Erica, it was Nivi.
And Prakruti.
Was I incorrect? Oh, I'll let Ashish take it.
Yes.
Okay, we'll let Ashish be in charge of this one.
I said pepper.
I'm divesting myself
So
from.
we have 3 incredible books.
Maybe is disqualified because she's part of the organizer.
Oh, we forgot to say that. If you work with us, we're sorry, you're disqualified.
But we'll get a copy of the book. It's just been fantastic, and the book looks so inviting. I mean, I didn't expect it to be just so overwhelming. All of the stuff that you talked about, and it's just beautiful to see so much engagement within the community for the work that you've shown here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited so many of you came and stayed till the end and paid attention and asked questions. And, you know, I appreciate your interest, but I think what I want to kind of close on is that, you know, all of these spices are all parts of Indian cuisine. So you have all this power already in your spice cabinets, in your spice boxes. And it's, you know, you may not even need to really change how you're cooking, but I always say, try to make what you're making a little bit better. So if you're eating mainly refined white rice, try to switch to brown rice. You know, if you are using a lot of fat, in your, maybe use a little bit less or use an unsaturated fat. If you are not eating that many leafy greens and, you know, your vegetable of choice is potato, no offense to potatoes, maybe start enjoying some more leafy greens. Whatever you do, try to cook more at home. You have a lot more control over your food when you're cooking as opposed to when you're eating out. But of course, I have gotten a lot of my inspiration from eating out. So there is time to eat out as well. But home cooked will always be the best, and you can control it even in something as simple as how much salt you put in it, right? How much salt, how much fat, and making those small changes will add up over time and improve your health. And your best indicator of that is not necessarily what the numbers show, although those are important, but how you feel. So I hope that you will all feel better and get enjoyment out of cooking. And I hope that you'll all try out these recipes. Hope you'll all buy my cookbook. I'll be looking at my numbers next week and see if this had an impact.
Oh, you do not disappoint. We are so honored to have you here, and many people saying yes, 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 and thank you. Excellent, amazing, totally enjoyed it.
Thank you.
mean, we
What
can
is the
all
name?
smell and taste it.
What's the name of the book?
The book, Spicebox
Kitchen.
Kitchen. We'll show it one more time here. And
Nice.
yeah, and what we put it in, let's put it in the chat one more time, Ashish.
You're all getting the slides. It's all over the slides as well.
Yeah.
I just put it in the chat.
Thank
Okay.
you.
a few
By
times now.
Dr. and Chef Linda Shiue. Yeah, again, we're so honored to have you here. And I know everybody is so grateful and excited to try these recipes and the recipes in the book. Beautiful.
And come to my cooking classes too. For those of you who are Kaiser members, sorry to be from a competitor, they're free. But otherwise they're $20 and well worth it. And it's fun. It'll be this exact setup in this kitchen. So it'll be fun.
Yes, I agree. Linda was known, there are a few people I think from Palo Alto Medical Foundation years ago, but she, when she was there, she was a star and everybody wanted to go to her cooking classes, and then she opened this kitchen. So you're always in for a treat if you're at one of her cooking demonstrations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good night,
Bye.
everybody. Go cook.
Thank
something
you.
delicious now.
Happy
Good
eating.
night. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy eating, everybody.
Again, Ashish and Erica.
you.
I really
Thank you
Dr.
so
Shiue.
much.
We'll see you next month, Thursday night, Huddle.
Thank you, Dr. Shiue.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dr.
Bye.
Shiue.
Well.